self-care warriors. So today I wanted to talk to you about a gaslighting tactic that narcissists often use in order to convince their victims that they're crazy or imagining things. Narcissists and sociopaths will often tell the victim that they need help when they start reacting to their abuse. So let's say that a victim is being chronically terrorized by the narcissist. The narcissist may intermittently place some positive behaviors here and there in order to convince the victim that he or she is imagining things, that they're not always that bad, and leaves the victim basically reeling in doubt, spinning in self-doubt about whether the abuser is actually an abuser. So imagine living this way. I'm sure many of you don't even have to imagine, you've experienced it. Imagine how that's already instilling a sense of self-doubt in the victim, right? The victim is gaslighting themselves on a daily basis, minimizing, rationalizing, denying things. And if you've never heard about narcissistic abuse, imagine if you were in that situation for the first time. You wouldn't even know where to start putting the pieces back together and realizing that your reality is accurate, that you are grounded in the truth of abuse. You're grounded in the truth of the fact that this is an abusive relationship and you need to get out. You need to detach. You need to be able to trust yourself and your own intuition. So imagine what starts happening when the abuse victim starts speaking out or dares to fight back against his or her abuser. The abuser will try to multiply the gaslighting effect by convincing the victim that he or she is crazy. Now, obviously, we've talked about on this channel before how an abuser might accuse the victim of being too sensitive, of not being able to take a joke, of not having a sense of humor, of lacking thick skin. But what about the idea that they might need therapy, that they might need medication? The narcissist will often try to act as if the victim is the one in need of therapy or medication, when it is in fact the narcissist who needs therapy and medication, and, well, let's face it, probably divine intervention at that, right? Because narcissists don't really always benefit from therapy, and that's probably the understatement of a lifetime. But think about the way that this gaslighting effect is multiplied and enhanced when you, the victim, or the survivor, whatever you choose to label yourself as, we can both be victims and survivors at the same time. There's no, exclusion as to one or the other if we choose to be a survivor. We're still victims of narcissistic abuse, even if we feel like we've survived and thrived. It doesn't make our victimization any less, right? So you are a victim of abuse, and then someone is telling you that you need therapy or medication, and that there's something wrong with you because you can't stop obsessing over the things that they say. You can't stop ruminating and having flashbacks and having nightmares because of the awful things that they've done to you, the awful things that they've said to you. And, if we are in some way tone deaf to verbal and emotional and psychological abuse or even physical abuse because we grew up in that type of environment, it is much easier to gaslight us into thinking that we are the ones in need of help. And we might convince ourselves that everything is in our head, that all we need to do is focus on not having these nightmares, not having these ruminating thoughts, these flashbacks, which are actually normal symptoms of the aftermath of psychological abuse. You cannot face a trauma without having some sort of side effect, having symptoms of that trauma arising. Even if it doesn't fully manifest into PTSD or complex PTSD, you're still likely to have some symptoms. And for the abuser to convince you that your reactions to their abuse are somehow abnormal, somehow warranting therapy, medication, or psychiatric evaluation or hospitalization, is just another attempt for them to gaslight you into thinking that you are the pathological one, when in fact you are the victim, as well as the survivor of their abuse. So remember that. Remember that when you're being gaslighted in the first place and you dare to speak out, the gaslighter will always try 10 times harder in order to make you believe that you are the crazy one, that you are the insane one. And honestly, it doesn't even matter at this point what flaws or shortcomings you might perceive in yourself, because we all have flaws, we all have shortcomings. Humanity is not the problem. We're all human. We all have these characteristics that don't make us perfect people. It's what you do with your imperfections, it's how you hold yourself accountable for your actions. And the aftermath of trauma leads to these devastating results, these devastating symptoms in our mind, body, and spirit that we are not responsible for. This has occurred because of abuse. It's not because of some character flaw, it's not because of some sort of disorder in our part. Um, I know that there's people who have interacted with narcissists who might be narcissists themselves or might have some sort of other toxic, malignant traits, but those are, you know, um, far fewer than we'd like to imagine. For the most part, survivors of narcissistic abuse are incredibly caring, compassionate, warm, loving people, and that's why narcissists choose us in the first place. We are accommodating, we are flexible. These are our biggest strengths, and yet these are turned into weaknesses as soon as we meet a toxic person who is willing to exploit them. So the next time you think about yourself as toxic or somehow defective or worthless or needing therapy or medication, know that you might need professional support, but it's not because of you. It's because you've been abused by a narcissist. It's funny because the very people who tell you to go to therapy often need therapy themselves. And then their abuse causes you to go to therapy. So it's like a vicious cycle. It's a negative feedback loop. It just keeps going on and on and on, where the very people who are left untreated are the very people who need to be treated, while the people who are the normal ones tend to be the ones who are overly medicated, the ones who are told that they need to go to therapy, the ones that are told that they need help, the ones that are put in hospitals sometimes because they're unable to decipher that the reality that they're experiencing, the reality they're suffering, is not due to any sort of shortcoming on their part, but rather due to chronic abuse, chronic trauma, and the aftermath of that psychological terrorism that they've endured, that they've survived. And if you are a survivor and a thriver of this type of abuse, then you also know that, owning our victimization doesn't make you any less of a survivor, right? Because owning the fact that we were victims allows us and enables us to reverse the gaslighting effect and see that it's not due to our own character flaws, it's not due to any kind of disorder on our part or toxic malignant traits that we have suffered this abuse and have been reacting to it. It's completely normal, it's completely human to react to abuse and to react to trauma in this way. So I want you to know that while you might need professional support for the abuse that you've suffered to help guide you and support you through that with a therapist who actually knows about narcissistic abuse, who is actually trained in domestic violence situations, who understands the underlying trauma and how hard it is to extricate yourself from an abuser, how hard it is to heal, someone who's validating. Yes, you might need that professional support, but it's not because of something that's wrong with you. It is because of everything that was wrong with your abuser. So I hope this video helps. If you found it validating, if you want to share your story about how maybe the narcissist in your life gaslighted you about therapy and medication and making you believe that you were the crazy one, feel free to share your stories below. I always appreciate them. And until next time, take care.